When I was about 12 or 13, growing up in the Outer Mission district of San Francisco, a lady moved in across the street from us. And actually, I'm not going to change her name because, yeah, we've written about this, we've discussed this, and there's nothing to hide here. But her name is Miss Helm, and she had a roommate who lived in the downstairs of the house, and they each had a dog and a cat. So 2 dogs, 2 cats. I think might even have been 3 cats at one point. 2 cats living upstairs, 1 cat living downstairs. So they went on. So we became friends. Our family became friends with them, with Miss Helm, and then downstairs was Miss Andrea and Una, who actually I consider to be my first dog. I'll tell you that. That's what I'm getting to in a second. Una and Kara. Kara was the black cat that lived downstairs. Anyway. So, Miss Andrea and Miss Helm went on vacation to Hawaii for a week, and I was in charge of watching their house. And her house, because Miss Helm was the owner, it was one of the nicest houses on our blocks. It had like a pond in the middle, like a koi pond with a little bridge and these gorgeous like raised beds. And it was like very obvious that, like, I don't know, kids didn't live there, but in our neighborhood, that was, it was a more like family and commuter neighborhood. Like, people didn't have like gorgeous little homes like literally out of like a magazine, right? Is the best way I know how to describe. Like, she attracted all these birds to her backyard because of all the different plants and flowers that she had there and all the feed. So if you understand what I'm putting down, like, going over to watch Miss Helm's house was quite a different environment and experience from like the 3 boys who were raising all hell across the street. Okay. So anyway, I was in charge of watching her house, and I was also in charge of, well, really watching the pets, right? That was kind of my job, my duty, that ever since, as long as I can remember, I've always, even before I started my business many years later. But this is where I really fell in love with Una. Una the dog, West Highland White Terrier. And I actually consider Una to be my first dog, and I think Miss Andrea would agree. Obviously, Una was her dog, and Una has since crossed the Rainbow Bridge. May she rest in peace. But Una and I had a very special connection. So I would take her out walking like 3 times a day because I would look for any excuse to take a dog on a walk at the time. Like, I wanted a dog so badly. And Una, for all intents and purposes, was my dog. And again, I think Miss Andrea would agree with that. For Christmas that year, I made her this gorgeous, beautiful leather collar by hand that I like hand dyed, hand print stamped with her name on it. O-O, not U-N-A, right? It was O-O-N-A-G-H was like the long name. Anyway, I love Una. I loved Una. So what I'm getting at is that when the owners came back, when Miss Andrea and Miss Helm came back, what I was told, and this has happened again, this has happened a few times, let me just say this, is that Una would get so depressed, I guess she was so used to me taking her out, that Miss Andrea started paying me to take Una out for walks a few times a week. Okay? So this was one of the most happiest memories of my childhood, was getting paid to walk Una across the street. I honestly would have done it for free, but the fact that I was making some money was even better. So, originally, I think the agreement was 3 walks a week, and she would pay me for 2 of them, And then we did a cooking class for the other one. And she would teach me all these really cool cooking lessons. When we would get back from our walks, sometimes Miss Andrea would, I I don't know how else to say it, but she would like have comments or would like say weird interesting things to the dog. And I was kind of intrigued by that, I'll be honest. So one time, I forget how this came up, but she asked if we saw any dogs out while we were out on our walk. And I was like, no, we didn't actually see any. I think we saw a couple like in a window, like as we were walking by, but we didn't actually come across any. And she was like, yeah, she said that. I think that's what Una was trying to tell me, that she kind of saw some off in the distance, but she didn't actually interact with anything. And me, mind you, I've always had an open mind. I've always had a sixth sense. And in my head, I'm thinking like, okay, there's something here. There's something here. I can feel it. And I have always been the type who has been very willing to like learn a new, like I've seen the value of learning a new skill. And at this point I had already known that a huge part of my life was going to be dedicated to the animals, capital T, capital A. And in my head, I learned, hey, if I can learn how to communicate with animals, whatever she's doing, there's something here. That much I was convinced by. And I was like, if I can learn this, this is going to help me immensely. Immeasurably, this is going to help me in my future career and with what I want to do with my life. So I asked her, I said, instead of the cooking lesson, I may have even said instead of one of the walks, so she was only paying me for one walk and then the other two. Again, that's fine. I was, right? I lived with my parents. I was a kid. I didn't care. I wanted the skills. I wanted the knowledge. I said, would you be willing to teach me how to do that? And she was like, of course. She said, bet. So in the next video, I'm going to tell you how that process kind of began and how I kind of took matters into my own hand, because I really needed some kind of proof for myself that this was a real thing. And I got my proof. I will say that. I will continue the story of how I learned animal communication in the next video, part 2.